guys, it's Ashley and welcome to the first wrap-up of 2021. I read some really great books this month and I'm really excited to talk about them with you. I will give a little disclaimer here. Because I did the 12 Days of Bookmas videos back in December of last year, I did count the last 3 books that I read in that month toward my 2021 goal. So the first 3 books that I'll share with you here are ones that I read back in December, but I'm counting as read in January because, I don't know, my reading year kind of ended last year, like early December. It just didn't feel right for me to continue to read after I made those like end of the year videos, you know? But regardless of that, I read some awesome books this month, and I also read a couple of books that I did not think were so awesome, one of which I have mixed feelings about and the other I literally DNF'd, and I never do that like purposely. So without further ado, I'm just gonna start talking about these books and my thoughts because I want to share them all with you. So the first book that I ended up reading technically in December, but in 2021 I'm counting it, is Lore by Alexandra Bracken. You might have already heard a lot about this story. I did mention it in my most anticipated releases of 2021, so I'm really glad that I read it super early because I can knock that one off the list. This book follows Greek mythology and it kind of puts a spin on everything, where we have this event called the Aegon, which takes place every 7 years, which means for 7 days every 7 years, the Greek gods and goddesses who at one point betrayed Zeus end up becoming mortal for a week, for 7 days, and they are basically like hunted down by these Greek hero like lineage families, and if somebody kills a Greek god, they end up taking their powers and ascending as that new god. Essentially, we follow this girl named Lore, or Melora is her full name, and she has had some really bad, horrible things happen in the last Aegon, and so she just wants out. She wants nothing to do with it. But of course, when the next Aegon happens, she can't escape it because it occurs in her home city of New York. She walks home one day and finds the Greek god Athena dying on her doorstep and has to help save her by binding their fates together, and then essentially the story goes from there. It was a really interesting take on all of these sort of Greek myths because I'm so used to a lot of the Percy Jackson stuff where everything is like fun and happy-go-lucky and like, yeah, sometimes people die, but like it's a fun time, you know? And this was not that. This was pretty dark, but I actually really liked the take on it, and because I haven't read a whole lot of Greek mythology like inspired books in my life other than Percy Jackson, I did really enjoy it for that sort of difference, and I'm really eager to reading more. So if any of you guys have Greek mythology book recommendations that you want to leave in the comments, do that because I'm really looking for more. There were points in the beginning of the story where I was like, am I gonna finish this? I'm not sure how I'm feeling. And then once it got to, I want to say like a third of the way in, or like, I don't know, some point in the middle of the story, I was like, okay, I'm invested. So really enjoyed this story, really looking forward to any more Greek mythological recommendations you guys have got for me, and that's that. And then the next 2 books that I finished up in December were, of course, ones that I mentioned back in my January TBR, I think, and I said that I wouldn't tell you what I thought until it came down to my January wrap-up, and we are here, and those books are The Well of Ascension and The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, books 2 and 3 in the Mistborn trilogy. I finished the Mistborn trilogy and I have a lot of thoughts. So you guys know how much I loved the Mistborn trilogy, and I loved how just good it was as just a high fantasy. It was, I loved it. I loved all the characters. I loved the story, the plot, the heist, the everything about it I absolutely loved. But I didn't know when I was going to finish the series, and so at the end of December I was like, you know what? Fuck it, we're just gonna do it. So I did, and I picked them both up and I finished them. I'm gonna talk about The Well of Ascension first because I did actually take notes on both of the separate books. I'm not gonna treat them as one book because I do have differing thoughts on both of them. So we're gonna talk about The Well of Ascension first. This book, the second book in the series, is actually my favorite in the series, which hasn't happened to me in a while. It's not very often you come across a trilogy and the middle book ends up being your favorite. So what I love the most about this book, and the reason that it's my favorite, is specifically because of Vin and Elend. Vin and Elend in this story compared to where they were in the first one, and their growth in this story, not only within themselves but also like politically, and just all of the things that happen in the beginning of this story that take us to the beginning of The Hero of Ages, it just really like shined for me. I don't know, like I was so invested in their character growth rather than the plot that was actually happening that I absolutely was obsessed with this book. And because I love a good romance in a story, I did not think that that took away at all from any of the action or the suspense or the like actual plot that was happening. I just can't get over them as characters. I just can't. How much they've grown from book 1 to book 2, book 3. I love them with all of my heart. There were also so many twists in this book in particular that I did not expect. There was the whole thing with Zane that was happening that I was like, this is throwing me for a loop. There were all of the conversations that Vin had with the Khandra. There were just so many things that happened in this story that I absolutely loved. And the last thing that I'm gonna end on in this book is Tensoon. I love my baby Tensoon. Now, the Hero of Ages, I have conflicting thoughts on. I liked the story, okay? I did not like it as much as I liked Mistborn or The Well of Ascension, so surprisingly, the last book in the series is actually my least favorite. I liked the story, I liked how it started and where it was going, and I was like, okay, this is cool, we can do this, and then the end just wasn't my favorite. I can understand how it came to be and why it was that way and what happened, and you know, I appreciate it for what it is, but I did not want it to go in that direction. So personally for me, it wasn't my favorite, but I know that it made sense in a way. One of the things that I love the most about this book is like we focused more so on some of the side characters than just Vin and Elend's, like in the second one. We had a lot of point of view chapters from Spook, who was a character that we only slightly got to know in the first book and then sort of didn't really see in the second one, and now in the third one he's like a main character who's getting like a point of view. We also got stuff about Demo, who was just so like, I loved him so much. And then again, the twists, learning about all of the like hemorrhagy stuff and the Khandra and the Colossus and like all of the things that you just didn't know what they were and how it worked, the whole Inquisitor thing and everything that you didn't know what the hell it was in book one was like slowly unraveling and opening up in this story until you finally got the full picture and you were like, oh my god, hot damn, what the fuck? So because of all of those things, I really loved this story. There's so much more that I want to say, like specific wise, but I don't want to spoil anything. So I'll just leave it to you to read this book if you haven't already. Now that I've spent nearly 20 minutes going over 3 books, let me go ahead and share with you the rest of what I read. The first one was Fire by Kristen Kishore, which was the one that I had sort of mixed feelings about. This story is the second book in the Graceling Realm series. It does not follow the same world as Graceling, but it follows the Dells, which is sort of a kingdom that is sort of adjacent to the Graceling realm. Picture like there's a big mountain range that cuts like the 2 places in half. We're gonna follow the one on the other side of the mountain range. That's how I was picturing it in my head. So the Dells is a world that's very different from Graceling. You have these like monsters that take the form of other things, but they're just like super colorful and really bright. So you'll have like lilac dragon things and like bright yellow dragon things and colorful neon bugs and things that are monsters. You know what? I really couldn't tell you what they do or what the reasoning behind it was. I don't honestly remember because I wasn't the biggest fan of that. For whatever reason, the world building in this one was not crazy to me, or I wasn't crazy about it, if that makes sense. I really liked Graceling so much that when I read this one, it kind of felt a little flat in the world sort of aspect of it. But the thing that really pulled me through this story was the romance. Essentially, this story is about a girl named Fire who is a monster. She's a human monster though, so her hair is like neon red, orange, pink, and that's where she got her name Fire from. What happens is that human monsters are very like alluring. They're like, just seeing their face will like cause people to like go into like endless amounts of lust and like desire and things like that. They like have this very alluring sort of capability about them, and so she does not like that about herself. So she tries to like hide away in a way, or like she's not very comfortable with that about her because of things in her past and like things that have happened. You know, to be honest, I don't really, what was the plot in this story? There's like the king who rules is being threatened by like these 2 other people, and so there's a war coming and they needed Fire for something, so she ends up going to the capital or the king city or whatever. I don't really know, to be honest with you, because like I said, the only thing that pulled me through this story was the romance. I feel really bad saying that. I did enjoy Fire, but I just, for whatever reason, the world just kind of threw me out of the story. I was like not a huge fan. Fire and Briggan I loved. But then like everything else, I was just like, why are there so many like, oh, I'm going to sleep with your wife as revenge to get back at you, and then she's gonna have my child, but then you also had a child with this other woman who you cheated on with your wife, and then also he's gonna sleep with like 5 women and they're all gonna get pregnant, and then you don't know who your father is, but it turns out it's actually this guy who you thought was your father, but it's not. Your father is actually this person who, you know, there's just so much weird like family ties that way. There were so many like twists that just ended up being like, oh, he slept with this woman who was not his wife and this is really his son. I swear when we got to the end of this book, there were like 6 different people who were pregnant who we found out we either didn't know who the father was, or the person didn't know who, you know, their family was, or it was just like some weird like revenge tactic, and it was just very odd. But anyway, besides all of that, I liked parts of this story, but a lot of them were just not for me, so for that reason I'm just gonna set this aside as sort of like a not a huge fan, but didn't entirely hate book. But I do want to read Bitter Blue, which is the 3rd book in the Graceling Realm trilogy, because we do follow Bitter Blue, who was a character in Graceling. So I'm hoping that we will, you know, see more of the characters that we know and be back in the world that we know. And I want to know if these 2 worlds, like the Graceling Kingdom sort of place and also the Dells, are ever going to connect. And then before we get to my favorite books of the year so far, which if you've been following me on Instagram, you may already know what those are, I am going to talk about the book that I ended up DNFing, and I was really, 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 really sad that I ended up having to not finish this, because I was really looking forward to it. I had really high hopes for this book, and unfortunately it just did not hit the mark with me personally. And that story is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I've talked about this book so much between videos last year, videos this year, like TBRs that I put this book on so many times. Because I was really hoping that I was going to like it. I thought that everything that I had read about it sounded like it would be right up my alley. And for some reason, it was a combination of the writing and the characters that I was just not the biggest fan of. So if you don't know anything about this story, it is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in the 1920s in Shanghai. We follow these 2 characters, Juliet and Roma, who are of rivaling gangs. They are the heirs to the Scarlet Gang and the White Roses. Shanghai during this time also is sort of, I remember learning about this in history classes as well, which I was totally lost on me until I started reading this again. So I really appreciated the historical fiction sort of aspect of this book. Shanghai was sort of like a pie in this, I guess, time period where different nations, like there was a French section of Shanghai, there was a, you know, Chinese section of Shanghai, there was also the communists who were trying to take it over, the nationalists, the Americans, the British, like everybody wanted a piece of this pie back in this time in Shanghai. And so you had all of these different sort of countries and nationalities and things like rivaling one another, all of this turmoil politically and just everything that was happening. And then on top of that, Chloe Gong went and added in this sort of creepy monster, like almost disease sort of thing that was spreading through Shanghai. So there was a lot of different things going on. I could appreciate the like varying levels of like tension, I guess you would say, like plot in this story. But again, the things that didn't do it for me personally were the writing and the characters. So the writing, I don't know why I didn't vibe with it. I just didn't vibe with it. And in addition, there was something about Juliet that I just did not enjoy as a character. I still have my page marker in here. I made it to page 294 before I was like, I feel like nothing has happened. Like I said, the pace was just really off for me too. Like it was just moving so slow and I just wanted something to happen. Like I wanted, like obviously Juliet had been betrayed by Roma and you know, there was a lot of tension there and a lot of not only like romantic tension, but like also just like angry tension, you know? And I just needed that to get at least a little bit resolved earlier on so that we could start working together and start like, you know, overcoming our differences and realizing the truth and that sort of thing. And it just literally, page 294 and I'm still not there yet. They had literally just started working together, like just started working together. So in the end, personally, not a fan. Just gonna leave it at that. I wish that I had liked this and I just didn't. And so finally we get to the most favorite book of mine that I have read this month, and that is City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I loved this book with all of my heart. I loved it so much so that I actually already read Kingdom of Copper, which is the second book. This book was on my TBR. It was on my books I want to get to in 2021 list, so I'm really happy that I managed to get to it, and I'm even more happy that I loved this book so much. But if you don't know anything about this story, essentially it is a Middle Eastern inspired fantasy that follows multiple perspectives. So in this book we follow Nari and Ali. Nari is a young girl, a thief living in Cairo, and she has these powers that she doesn't really know where they came from or what to do with them or how she got them, but she's just living day by day as best she can. At one point she ends up accidentally summoning this like warrior from the past named Dara, and he discovers what she is and he helps her on their journey to Daevabad, which is this big city of brass, right? And in Daevabad we follow Alizad, or Prince Ali. He is trying to make life better for the common people, I would say, and his family doesn't want any of that, and so he struggles between doing what's right and what his family wants and staying true to them. We follow both of these characters as they are sort of thrust into different things, I guess you would say. Nari is thrust into this world she didn't know existed and trying to come to terms with these powers that she realizes mark her as a very important person in this world. And Ali is trying to figure out like if what he's known all his life and what he's been trained to do all of his life is sort of gonna go hand in hand with what he knows is right. This is such a good fantasy book. This is so good. I absolutely loved this. At the beginning, I was very confused. If you watch my reading vlog, or if you've already watched it, you will know that. I was very confused with the world because there's so many different terms and things that you are sort of learning about that you are sort of thrust at you, but I worked my way through it. I pushed through, I got the understanding down, it was fine, everything's good. Yeah, it's just so diverse and so rich in, you know, the lore, and the thing that I really love the most about this is that there's so much backstory that you're learning throughout this story that really gives you sort of an understanding of the people of this world and the magic and the reasons behind things, and I absolutely loved all of that. I loved learning more about it and understanding how these people work and why they do the things that they do and why the things that are important are important. I loved it. It was just so good. It was so good, and as I said, I loved Nari and Ali. I loved their characters in this book, and I loved the Kingdom of Copper even more so for those reasons. I actually hadn't expected to finish this in January. I literally finished it last night. Today is February 1st when I'm filming this. I finished it at 11:30 p.m. last night, January 31st. So I literally finished it the end of January. There was just something about this story that as soon as I got, I want to say like halfway through, I flew through the last half of the book in less than a day. I swear to you, I just sat there and in one sitting I read the rest of the book. It was so good. The Kingdom of Copper, we also get Dara's perspective, who is a character that I was really looking forward to learning more about, because we got sort of a overview of who he was in this book, because he is a main character in the first book, in the City of Brass, but in this one we get his perspective, which I was really looking forward to. But the thing that I wanted to say was that whereas the City of Brass, like, yes, it had its moments, yes, it has its twists that are just like so like jaw-dropping, you're like, what the hell is gonna happen? The Kingdom of Copper takes that to a whole different level. I'm gonna say a couple of things real quick that will be spoilery, so I'm gonna keep my hand up until I put my hand down. Go ahead and mute if you don't want to hear this. A few things really quick. If Manaza, I'm probably gonna pronounce names wrong too, so I apologize, but if Manaza did not kill Ghassan with the weird coppery magic thing, I was about to rip his head off myself, because I have never hated a man more than I have like Scythe Goddard in the Scythe series. I did not like Ghassan. I hated him. I wanted him to die. And yeah, there were moments where like I thought that was going to change when he had like interactions with his family and stuff, but then he would just ruin those interactions, and I'm like, dude, you're not even trying to make me like you in any way whatsoever. So yeah, hated him. Also, my baby Jamshid, oh my god, I like need him to be okay. Every single scene with him, I was like waiting, and I was like, is this the moment where they're gonna find out that he's a Nahid? Is this the moment where they're gonna find out that he can heal? Oh my god. And then when he was so excited to be like an apprentice to Nari, I was just like bawling my eyes out. I'm like, you are so adorable. Please find out who you are soon. In addition, my absolute favorite part of this story, like hands down 100% favorite part, was when Ghassan was talking to Ali and he was like telling him, you know, oh, if you hadn't done this thing that you just did, you know, I was ready to welcome you back into the family. You could have stood side by side with us. You could have, you know, we could have presented a united front. Like, we could have been a family again. And Ali, the first you know, reaction that he had to that sentence was absolute revulsion. And I was like, yes, yes, my Mareed possessed baby, you understand now. You understand how horrible your father is and that he needs to be taken down. Ah, so good. So good. And last thing that I want to say again about Dara is that, you know, I didn't like the actions that he took, but I knew that was the direction that he was going to go in based on the conflict that he was having at the beginning of the story, whether he was, you know, really truly thinking that, you know, Banu Manaza, is that how you say it? If she was really going down the right path. She seemed to be sort of following in the lead of Ghassan and, you know, becoming sort of like a tyrant ruler in a way. And his struggles with that, because he was supposed to follow her and be her Afshin, I knew were going to lead him down the path of destruction and that he was going to ruin his chances with Nari and everything like that. And when it happened, I wasn't surprised about it, but I was a little like sad because I didn't want that to happen to Dara. But most importantly, I think the thing that would have solved all of these issues is that he needs to stop being resurrected, because that is doing absolutely nothing for him. So yeah, I loved this story just as much, if not more, than the first one. This series is so good. So if you want like a really awesome, just like Middle Eastern inspired fantasy, like high fantasy, adult fantasy, whatever you're looking for, if you want like a really good fantasy, just pick up this series. It's so much better than I had imagined it was going to be. I am addicted, and I'm so excited to get to the last book in the Daevabad trilogy this month, February, hopefully. Crossing my fingers I'll get to it. I'm obsessed. I love it so much. And so now that this wrap up is going to be way too long, I'm here to tell you that it's done. Thanks for sticking through this absurdly long video. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing my thoughts and that some of you maybe feel the same way. I don't know, let me know in the comments. I said last year that I was going to dedicate this year to reading as many fantasy books as I could, and I have not lied so far. Every book that I've read in January or tried to read in January has been a fantasy of some kind. So I'm really happy with where I've gotten so far. 6 books out of 50. I'm excited, and I hope that I can continue the momentum and continue to read some awesome fantasy. And yeah. If you guys had a favorite book that you read this month, definitely let me know in the comments. But other than all of that, I think that's going to be it for this video. So if you want to follow me on any of my socials, all my handles are in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you later. Bye!